Psalm 119. It's funny, Pastor liked this title. I did not like the title. I kept trying to come up with something that was better, and I was literally getting ready to send my sermon to him for review. I'm like, I've got to come up with something better than this, and I still couldn't. So I'm hoping that maybe the quirkiness, the nerdiness, whatever, of the title maybe makes it stick a little bit better in your brain. I've titled this Photons and Fortitude. We'll be looking at Psalm 119, 105 to 112. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. I have sworn, and I will perform it, that I will keep thy righteous judgments. I am afflicted very much. Quicken me, O Lord, according unto thy word. Accept, I beseech thee, the freewill offerings of my mouth, O Lord, and teach me thy judgments. My soul is continually in my hand, yet do I not forget thy law. The wicked have laid a snare for me, yet I erred not from thy precepts. Thy testimonies have I taken as an heritage forever, for they are the rejoicing of my heart. I have inclined mine heart to perform thy statutes always, even unto the end. Let's open with a word of prayer. Our Heavenly Father, thankful once again for this opportunity to preach your word. I pray that you would help me to speak in thy power and not speak in my own. It's a waste of breath if I try to do this in my own power. And I pray that those that hear would listen and take application. It's in thy Son's name I pray. Amen. So photons. What's a photon? Yeah, it's essentially it's a measurement of the amount of a light. And right off the bat in verse 105, we get where I took that photons from. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. And so I've got my first point here is light for sight. And the fact that we need a lamp for our daily lives, a lamp for our feet, David's not talking about literally, the Bible doesn't shine and expose his way before him. He's talking about his spiritual life. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. This is demonstrative of the fact that the world in general is dark, a very dark place. It's full of sin, it's full of danger, which we'll get to in a few minutes. And if you do not have a light, you're going to be stumbling. The Lord refers to the Pharisees as the blind leading the blind. That's the general status of the world. And there are three places that the light is provided, I think, for. One is for your present. We see that, and again, in that very first clause, thy word is a lamp unto my feet. It's that general area right around your feet, so you can see that next step. And this kind of reminds me of when I was a night watchman. I was a night watchman at a camp up in Freedom, New Hampshire. And you're there between 9 and 2, and by the time camp is wrapping up during the summer, it's dark from your very first round until you leave at 2 a.m. in the morning. So you had to have a flashlight at all times because you obviously didn't have a lot of lights in the camp or anything like that. So a flashlight was absolutely necessary to help you see where you were going. There were some paths that you had to patrol that were very far away from any lights, any buildings, anything like that. And you needed to be able to see where you're going. And generally, we didn't have to worry too much about generally two-legged varmint weren't the kinds we had to worry about. We generally were more worried about, taking a trip to the perfume parlor with a skunk or, having a conversation as dinner with a bear or something like that. But in general, if you didn't have that flashlight, you were going to be walking into, you're going to be committing home invasions on orb weavers or that sort of thing. You needed to have that flashlight just to be able to see where you were going. You needed to know where you were. If you did have to chase somebody, which I did occasionally have to do, it was pretty handy to be able to see where the person was going. Or get the license plate of a car you needed to write down or something like that. And in the exact same manner, the Bible is given to us for practical wisdom in our everyday lives. It's not just a book that we take and we go, oh, well, that's nice. That was a good story. Every verse in the Bible has an application for you personally in your everyday life. It will help you determine, should I lie? Something as basic as that. It tells you what you should do in those situations when you're tempted to twist the truth for your own benefit. Right. It gives you instruction on whether or not you should listen to your teachers. You should listen to your mothers. It's Mother's Day, right? Right. Bible gives pretty clear instructions as to what we ought to do with our mothers. Proverbs is full of don't ignore the instruction of your mother or your father. So the light is given to us for our everyday lives. It's not given only so we can know what's going to happen in the future, or it's not just a history book that tells us of the past. It is very practical for your everyday lives here and now. But it is also for future enlightenment. If you look at that second part, thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. So this light unto my path is kind of like the sun shining on I like hiking. So I take this as kind of a hiking analogy. It's like the sun shining on your path. You've started at the base of the mountain. You know, you can see the top. You know where you're going. You might even be able to see along where you have to climb. If any of you have climbed Mount Shikorowa, you know you kind of climb, at least the path I took. You kind of climb up this way, and you can actually kind of see the ridge that you have to climb up to get to the peak of Shikorowa. If it's sunny, I can see all of that. If it's socked in, I don't really have an idea where I am. I just know I'm kind of on this trail, and maybe there's a target out there somewhere. It allows me to see potential difficulties. We're talking about potentially going and doing a hike on the Huntington Ravine Trail up Washington. And we will be able to see at some point, if the light is good, we'll be able to see that nasty head wall. I say nasty, it probably won't be that bad. But we'll be able to see the most difficult part of that hike if it's illuminated, right? If the sun's shining on our path, we'll be able to see, hey, we need to be ready for that difficulty coming ahead. And if you contrast, can you imagine what it would be like trying to hike at night? You can't see what's in front of you. You don't know where you're going. If you've ever, there's a very good reason why prior to the invention of night vision, armies didn't fight at night. It's because there was a very high tendency of blundering into an enemy or friendly fire. Ask Stonewall Jackson a thing or two about that. Oh, you can't. He's dead. But if you can't see where you're going, the chances of accidents happening, problems happening, are very, very high. So the Bible is provided. It provides us. We know where we're going, right? Our target is heaven. We know there's going to be difficulties. The Bible has promised us that all those that live godly, which should be our intention if we're living that way in our everyday life, the immediate step in front of us, we know that at some point down the line we're going to suffer persecution. So it allows us to prepare now for those hard times coming ahead, right? We know that Satan's going to come against us. But you can also see aid stations. If we extend this hiking analogy a little bit further, right? We know that the Lord will not suffer us to be tempted above that we are able. All of those promises are like little aid stations along the path that you can take as a encouragement. It's a light to your path. And why is this important? Well, because the dangers lurk all around us. If you look at Psalm 109, my soul is continually in my hand. And in David's case, his danger was quite often literally physical. That man lived on the run for many years of his life. And then he was a warrior king. He was constantly involved in wars, and the king led from the front. But for us, the spiritual danger is significantly more frequent. As we've talked about before, Satan is forever working against our spiritual interests. He's as a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. We constantly, every single day, we have our old man, which, if you're memorizing Ephesians chapter 4, is corrupt according to the deceitful lusts. He's ever present with us. It's our duty to consistently put him down, crucify the old man, die daily. And the wicked are ever present. If you look at verse 110, the wicked have laid a snare for me. And I know previously, in previous verses, as we've gone through Psalm 119, we've discussed how the wicked are watching us. They're trying to trip us up. But I got to thinking about this in particular, and sometimes I don't think they even try. They're just living their lives, doing what they want to do, not even realizing that they're a stumbling block to us, or potentially being. The reason I was thinking about this was I was in the office the other day, and I was with some coworkers, and the coworkers are just talking about video games or hiking and all of that. And there's nothing wrong with hiking, but throughout their language is just interspersed with curse words that are utterly unnecessary, completely and utterly unnecessary. And I'm just kind of like, they're just living their lives. To a degree, I don't think they even know any better. These were young kids that probably grew up with their parents cussing and swearing all around them all the time. They don't know any better. But for me, that's kind of a problem, to be around that stuff all day long. And I know that there are people. I live in a sanitized world. I know that Pastor probably has it much worse. Mr. Boyer has had it much worse. Mr. Penny. But just the wicked in their general everyday lives can be a snare unto us. We can start looking at maybe what they are able to do. They don't go to church on Sundays. They have a whole extra 24 hours to do whatever they want with. Could be a tempting thing to look at, right? That would be a snare to us. They don't even realize it. But again, the Bible's a light. It shines a light on, what they're missing out on, and they don't even realize it. And then also, kind of in that same vein, this light unto my path, you can also see where you've been. So you can see what's in front of you, but you can see where you've been. And this is interesting because this can either be a blessing or a curse, depending on how you use it. This can either paralyze you with fear and regret, or it can build your confidence. And that choice is entirely up to you. The analogy, again, of hiking. I watched a video about the Huntington Ravine Trail last week. And the video, it was kind of distorted because it was a GoPro, so it's a little bit warped around the edges. So again, I'm pretty sure it had to have made it worse than it seemed. But when the guy turned around, I have a little bit of a fear of heights. And when the guy turned around, I'm just kind of like, whoa, that would be paralyzing. I don't know if you guys have ever seen videos of the guys who climb to the top of these cell towers and there's just nothing around them. I would be like clinging for dear life to that pipe, and I wouldn't be able to move at all. And these guys are just like, oh yeah, they swing up, they change the bulb, and then they come back down. I'm just, no, that's not for me. I can't do that. It would paralyze me if I ever looked down at where I had climbed up to. Even if it had been at feet, for me to get as high as I had, if I looked down, I'm not going anywhere. Or you can look at it from the point of view of, there was one mountain I climbed. I cannot remember what the mountain's name was. But we got up, it was about midway between the parking lot and the peak. And there was this little side trail you could go out, and you climbed out on this outcropping of rock, and you could see way down there, you could actually see the parking lot where you had come from. And you knew you had made such good progress from where you had been, and you knew you still had a ways to go, but it was encouraging to be able to look down and say, hey, I've come a long way. I've made it a long way. I'm not turning back now. But that was a choice I had to make. I could look and I was like, that's a long way down. I need to get back down here get back down before I fall or something. So in like manner, we can turn around and we can see where our lives have been. And every single one of us has things that we regret. Every one of us has sins we've committed that we wish we hadn't done. And you can either choose to focus on that, or you can say, you know what, God's forgiven me for that. I don't want to do that anymore. I've repented. I see it as God saw it, as a wicked sin that I committed against him, but I'm not doing it again. God help me, obviously, because if you try to do it on your own, you're going to fail. But you also can see, I see where God worked. my father-in-law's death. I don't understand why that happened, but I can look back and say, I became a better man because that happened. It forced me to step up, to make decisions, to make calls, to become my own man, to be the family lead that I needed to be. I could see how God worked that out for the good in my life. We can look back in the church's history and say, hey, we can see that God was working right there. And you can learn from yours and others' mistakes based off of your past. It's always good to try to learn from others' mistakes so you don't have to make the mistake yourself. So we have light for sight. In verse 106, we see a very different topic. We have vows to keep. I have sworn, are David's first three words in this verse. And I think we very often read the passages regarding vows and the requirements surrounding them, and we always walk away with a thought, well, I'm just not going to make any vows. That's just too dangerous. I mean, you read Deuteronomy 23:31. When thou shalt vow a vow unto the Lord thy God, thou shalt not slack to pay it, for the Lord thy God will surely require it of thee, and it would be sin in thee if you don't keep the vow that you made. So I think a lot of us are like, well, I'm just not going to make any vow. Why would I make such a risk or take such a risk? But that's the wrong lesson altogether. If it were wrong to make a vow, God would have said, don't vow. Right. Instead, the lesson is, if you make a vow, think about what you say before you make the vow. And then, once you've made the vow, keep it. Right? Psalm 15. This is one of my favorite passages, Psalm 15. It starts out with, Lord, who shall abide in thy tabernacle? Who shall dwell in thy holy hill? And then later down in the chapter it says, he that sweareth to his own hurt and changeth not. So the idea is, don't vow carelessly with no intent to keep the vow. Some people vow just for show. That's right. I think pastors given the examples of faith promise, they just want to be able to say, hey, I give X number of dollars to the church. Look at me. Think of the Pharisees. They gave of their plenty into the temple. And the idea being they gave a lot of spices. And that Pharisee, the proud Pharisee who's praying in the temple, he's talking about all the stuff, the spices and everything he gives to the temple. In like manner, I think some people vow just to be able to say, hey, I promised I was going to do this. Right. But David here, there's not a shadow of that in David. He says, I have sworn, and I will perform it. Again, going back to Pastor's message a few weeks ago. Will, it's an exercise of his will. He didn't mindlessly make his vow and then just walk away and forget about it. He made the vow and said, okay, I've made this vow, now I'm going to do it. And it's important to note that David would have been fully aware of what God expected of him when he made this vow, when he swore that he was going to keep his judgments. Because, again, if you remember in the law, every king of Israel was required to write out the Old Testament, the law. So he would have known that, hey, if I don't keep this is sin. And David, as a man after God's own heart, would never have wanted to have sinned against his God. Another thing is, don't vow foolishness. Pastor, again, preached on Jephthah a little while ago. That man was a foolish man. That's right. What a thing to vow. And for a pointless purpose, too. He could have just said, I will sacrifice a goat. He could have been very specific, but for some reason it's almost like a hero complex. He's got to prove to God something. I don't think you're going to prove much of anything to God that way. Don't vow foolishness. Instead, again, we have an excellent example here for coming from David. I have sworn and I will perform it. And what's his vow? That I will keep thy righteous judgments. So rather, David vowed something excellent and wholesome. And as a matter of fact, this is something that all of us signed up for. If we're saved here, this is something all of us signed up for at salvation. We were not saved to continue calling our own shots and continuing in our sin. Romans chapter 6. We were saved recognizing that God's judgments are right and we are in violation of them. And we should not want that to be the case anymore.
That's right.
If we treated salvation as a glorified fire escape, then we don't care about God's judgments. But if we love God as we truly ought, then keeping his judgment should be something we jump at, we desire. It's not always going to be easy by any means. There are going to be days where you might not want to, but the general tenor of your life should be, I want to know what God's righteous judgments are, and I want to keep them. And all of this is, in general, a test of one's character, right? We talked about prudence a couple of weeks ago. When you vow a vow, you should look forward and say, hey, is this something I can actually keep? Unlike Jephthah, pastor, again, on the topic of faith promise, he has had people come to him who have vowed to God that they were going to give X amount, because they were in an emotional fury, they didn't use their heads and they vowed foolishly. It also tests your honesty.
Right.
Do you keep it, or are you a liar? Ultimately, right? That's kind of what it boils down to. You said a thing, and James says, let your yea be yea and your nay be nay, right? So if you don't do the thing, you're pretty much just a liar.
That's right.
So don't make foolish vows. The third thing we see in verse 107, afflicted to good ends. I am afflicted very much. Affliction means to be in a state of pain, distress, or grief. Now, I know there's such a thing as masochists, people who enjoy inflicting pain on themselves, but I'm definitely not one of those. I really don't enjoy being in a state of pain, distress, or grief. As a matter of fact, when I'm in those states, I want to get out of them as fast as I can. But there is much good that may come from spending some time in such a state, as much as we don't enjoy it. There's one of the definitions given in Webster's 1828 dictionary is literally, some virtues are only seen in affliction. And I got to thinking about, it's kind of like war. War separates the men from the boys, the brave from the braggarts. It's said that those that boast the most about what they're going to do when they enter combat are the first to run. And it's usually the little shy small kid who nobody thought could do anything that ends up doing great feats of bravery, heroism. And in the same manner, affliction has a nasty way of showing us who we really are. It demonstrates at first how frail we are, right? Typically, if we're without the Lord, I can only imagine, if we just take Job as an example again. If he didn't have the Lord, I can only imagine what he would have done. There were people, after the 1929 crash, committed suicide because they lost some money. They still had their families intact at least, but they lost all their money, so that was their life. They committed suicide. Just a little bit of affliction showed them who they really were and what they really valued. Affliction reveals where our weaknesses are. I'm a software engineer, and we have a love-hate relationship with QA, quality assurance engineers. Why? Well, because this might sound a little nerdy, a little weird, but when we write code, that code is very, we wrote that code. That's value. It's kind of like if you built something. You feel a certain level of pride in building, whatever it is you're building. What you're doing, the wood cutouts, the laser, and all of that. You feel a certain sense of pride in the work that you've done. Well, it's the same way with us software engineers. But the problem with QA is it's their job to show us how bad a job we did with our code. A good software engineer never tests his own code in the sense that we test it and send it right off to production. There should always be somebody else that takes a look at our code because we know how it's supposed to work. And so in general, we're not going to think of the edge case that's like, oh, that's going to blow that whole system up. It's very annoying when you send something off to QA and they're like, yeah, you didn't think of this or that or this or this or this. And you're like, ah. But it's an absolutely necessary thing. So affliction will show you where the chinks in your armor are. What do I need to reinforce? Where's the dam weak? Where's my wall broken down? And ultimately, affliction should force us to turn to God, His Word, and force us to rely on His strength. This is exactly as David did. I am afflicted very much. Quicken me, O Lord, according unto thy word. He doesn't rely on his own strength here. He's afflicted very much, and his only option is to turn to God's word and the promises therein. And this makes me think of pruning. The Bible says that every branch that brings forth fruit, He doesn't just leave it alone. It's like, oh, that branch is bringing forth fruit. That's a really good branch. I'm just going to let that be. No, what does He do? He prunes it so that it brings forth even more fruit. It's kind of, I have an apple tree in the backyard that I'm trying to slowly start pruning back because it's spent many years without being pruned. You're supposed to, what somebody told me is a bird should be able to fly through the branches, and that apple tree is definitely not letting any birds just fly right through it. So I have to go in and I have to find which branches do I need to cut, trim, just so that maybe someday it'll return to the producing the type of apples it once did, as opposed to the bad fruit. And then a biblical example, Joseph. In my Bible reading, I recently went through Joseph, and that man, that boy, was put through the ringer. I can't even imagine. One of my brothers, well, a couple of my brothers, enjoyed giving me a hard time when I was growing up. I'm the middle child between my older brother and my Quinn. Isaac's innocent in all of this, and Jared would often give me a hard time. And what my younger brother learned was that he could give me a hard time and then run to Jared, and I couldn't do anything with him because Jared was going to protect Quinn. And that annoys me, just a little bit. But in Joseph's case, his brothers, what I suffered compared to what Joseph's brothers did to him, there's not even a comparison. Betrayed by his brothers, thrown into bad situation. It seems bad situation. He improves. The Lord blesses him. He improves a little bit. Thrown into another bad situation. Situation improves, and then suddenly he's called before Pharaoh, and he becomes number 2 in the land. And not just number 2, but as he tells his brothers later, you meant this for evil, but God has used it so that many people might be saved alive, much people saved alive. Indeed, Israel as a nation is saved because Joseph is sent to Egypt under such bad circumstances. So afflicted to good ends. God does indeed work all things out together for good. Not in the way we think of it, for sure, but he does a pretty good job. I think we all can agree. In verse 108, we see free will, or free, not forced. Accept, I beseech thee, the free will offerings of my mouth. Now, I have no doubt that, again, David is thoroughly familiar with the Old Testament law, and he knows what a free will offering is. In a sense, you could say that all of the offerings in the Hebrew law were free will offerings, technically. You could disown the system entirely, not bring any sacrifices, but there were consequences for not doing it. In contrast, the free will offerings had no strings attached. These in particular were not required or coerced. Leviticus 22:18 says, "Ye shall offer at your own will." This is the exact same principle as 1 Corinthians 9:7. "Every man according as he purposeth in his heart, so let him give, not grudgingly or of necessity, but for God loveth a cheerful giver." Our offering should not be like paying taxes. I don't know about you, but I don't look at my virtual pay stub and go, "I'm so happy the government took 20% of my money, 15% or whatever the amount is, every paycheck." I generally look at that and go, "Well, that's another chunk of money wasted on fruitless spending, often with purposes that I thoroughly disagree with." And as a matter of fact, when my taxes go down, I'll never forget when the Trump tax cuts were passed in 2017 and they finally went into effect. And I saw that my paycheck was $20 bigger. I was ecstatic. It's like, yes, okay. I had been cool on Trump up till then, but it's like, hey, he made my paycheck go up. Hey, good grief, I'm happy now. But our offering shouldn't be like that. Paying our taxes is literally both grudgingly and of necessity. If we didn't have to do it, we wouldn't do it. And because we have to do it, we do it, and we're like, I hate the government. God is more interested in the attitude of the giver. In one place, the giver should be humble. Here, look at David's attitude regarding this free will offering. "Accept, I beseech thee, the free will offerings of my mouth." David's pleading with God to accept the sacrifice. And it's very easy for us to start thinking that we do God favors when we sacrifice our time or sacrifice our money. We think we do God a favor if we come here and go to church, or we go out here for the outreach, or anything else. Maybe we start thinking we do God a favor with these little sacrifices. I'm hesitant to call them sacrifices because they're really not that much. And we forget that God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, and if he were hungry, he would not tell thee. We forget that God has all the time of the world. He created time. He lives outside of time. And his purpose will be fulfilled whether or not you give of your time or your money. It always amazes me that we serve such a great God who could do everything by himself, yet he chooses to use weak men and women like us. But at the risk of having everybody say, well, okay, if he doesn't care, if he only cares about the attitude, I'm just going to give him the trash. No. He does care about the quality of the gift too. Leviticus 22, so continuing, I read only the first little portion of Leviticus 22:18. Ye shall offer at your own will. But you carry on the rest of it. Leviticus 22:18 and 19. Ye shall offer at your own will a male without blemish of the beeves, of the sheep, or of the goats. But whatsoever hath a blemish, that shall ye not offer, for it shall not be acceptable for you. So, yes, he cares a great deal about your attitude, but he wants your best.
That's right.
And I would wager that if your attitude about giving is right, if your attitude is that of a cheerful giver, the quality of your gift will match. You will want to give your best. And vice versa, if your attitude is grudgingly and of necessity, well, that's when that sheep over there that's got the lame leg suddenly looks like a pretty good free will offering, right? And the gift doesn't necessarily have to be much. Here, David is simply offering praise from his lips. He's not offering gold or silver. But his attitude is one of genuine worship, and so accepted, I believe, by God. This is one of the reasons why I pray before every music practice that we have. I always pray that our attitudes will be right. Because if our attitudes are misplaced, our service won't be accepted, and therefore is ultimately a waste of time. Because the reason we should be doing the music practice or anything is for God's glory. And if we're focused on ourselves and trying to gather glory to ourselves, we're just blowing hot air. It doesn't do our eternal accounts any good, I guess you could say. But it also accounts for physical. I referenced the Pharisees that were giving of their great plenty, but the widow woman gave 2 mites. But it was 100% of what she had. The Lord says she gave everything. I think the Lord blessed her for it. And this attitude of humility, flows right into learning. You remember we talked about having a teachable spirit a number of weeks ago. Teach me thy judgments, at the end of verse 108. O Lord, and teach me thy judgments. If you love God and want to give him your best, your attitude towards listening to the preaching will reflect that. You will give your best attention to it, devouring what God has prepared for you. If you come to church and you just sit in the pew and you don't have a desire to learn, you don't love the Lord, you don't have that humility that comes, again, as we talked about with this free will offering, the preaching's not going to, you're going to chafe under the preaching constantly. So if you ever find yourself complaining about giving to the church or taking time to pray, praise God, maybe it's time for an attitude check. A Christian should always be delighting to be able to give, again, I'm always amazed that the fact that God chooses to use us. He chooses to use me and my tithes and my faith promise. He chooses to use Mr. Penny, Mr. Boyer, and your tithes, your offerings, your money. What a privilege. What a privilege. That he chooses us to be the ones that go out and take part in the outreach ministry, to stand on the street, to spread God's word, to allow us to utilize our time, and not just that, not just as you know, when we get to heaven, we're going to say we're just unprofitable servants, but we're going to be rewarded. How amazing is that? Verse 111, glorious heritage. Thy testimonies have I taken as an heritage forever, for they are the rejoicing of my heart. This is a heritage, is like an inheritance, monetary or otherwise. And all of us have some family heritage we're proud of. Pastor's always extolling the main heir. And I admittedly, my family on my mother's side used to be quite an influential family in Maine. My grandparents moved us to New Hampshire. Nate mentioned the other day of being born a natural-born Texan. I'm proud of the fact that I have 2 grandfathers that served honorably during World War II. One was hitting beaches in the Pacific. The other was training pilots to fly B-17s. Proud of that heritage. All of us I'm sure, are proud of our American heritage. We're proud of this country, the freedom it has afforded, the prosperity that God has given to it. Those are all good things to be proud of, to know of, that we consider them glorious heritage. And in the exact same manner, the Bible provides landmarks for us that should not be removed. Principles for how to live. We've already kind of talked about this a little bit. It provides examples for us to follow. But ultimately, the greatest heritage is it reveals our path to eternal felicity. You know, we're proud of the Sons of Liberty and all that they achieved in the Boston Tea Party. They essentially were the foundation for the militia that would fight the British a couple of years later at Lexington and Concord. And all of us would look at them and say, hey, they were men that stood up. Or, I'm proud to be a son of liberty too. I want to see good, God-honoring liberty sown throughout the nation. But for us, the Bible provides us a way to be sons of God. What a heritage that is. The fact that we will be kings, that we are kings and priests. What a heritage that is for us to be able to enjoy. What a glorious heritage. And one that cannot be taken away. They're trying to erase the history of the United States. All of the good that has come from it is shrouded by the so-called evil that we have done. Don't get me wrong, America's done wrong things. I'm not saying America's perfect by any stretch of the imagination. Don't misconstrue that. The United States is not Israel. But that can be erased. They're trying to erase that. They're trying to make us no longer proud to be Americans. But they can't take us out of God's hands. That's an eternal heritage. And finally, Excelsior, ever upward, verse 112. I have inclined my heart to perform thy statutes always. This is actually kind of a little bit of a reinforcement of Psalm 106, or of verse 106, sorry. I have inclined my heart to perform thy statutes always, even unto the end. Inclined means going up, right? And again, going back to that hiking analogy, if anybody has climbed any sort of hill or anything like that, going up is hard. There's a reason why the ski slopes provide lifts to go up, and then you get to enjoy going down. Going up is hard, but going up also indicates intentionality, right? One of the companies my grandfather owned, he was stepping down from being the head of it, and my grandfather had a thing for giving gag gifts. And when he stepped down, he was handing over control to another man. He gave this man a little wooden paddle and said, "This is for you if you ever find yourself down a creek and need a paddle." Well, lo and behold, the man that he gave this company over to was a pretty lazy man. My mom worked for this company and said that the guy who took over was basically on the phone all day talking, and this woman would come in and have him just sign checks. He wouldn't look at the checks or anything like that, and turned out she was embezzling money from the company the whole time, and he wasn't paying any attention. He didn't want to do the hard work, and so he ended up down a creek, and the paddle that my grandfather saved him wasn't going to be enough to save him. And Proverbs speaks of the opposite of going up. Proverbs 7:25, let not thine heart decline to her being the strange woman. Let not thine heart decline to her ways. Go not astray in her paths. Again in Proverbs 5:5, her feet go down to death. Her steps take hold on hell. Going down's easy. Any simpleton can do that.
That's right.
It's only a dead fish that goes downstream, right? But we as Christians, we should aspire to perform thy statutes always. It's not going to be easy. Nowhere in the Bible has God ever said that this is going to be easy. It's always going to be an uphill struggle. But that should not be daunting to us Christians. It should be our desire, our heart's, our core desire, to perform thy statutes always, even unto the end. Let's remember what the end goal here. We're kind of bringing it back, finishing where we started. We have a light. We can see where we're going. We know it's going to be hard. We know there are going to be difficulties. But those should not dissuade us. We should resolve, each one of us, to keep thy righteous judgments, to perform thy statutes always, even unto the end. There's no qualifications here, even unto the end if it's easy. Even unto the end if my bank account's always full. Even unto the end if I don't have to shed any blood. Nope, just even unto the end. When God says I'm done, I'll be done. I'll be done. Let's close in a word.